Welcome, dear listeners, to a podcast that's about to transform the way you lead, the way you grow and thrive in your life and career. Get ready to embark on a journey filled with inspiration and self-discovery. This is Afsheen, the host of the Getting Real podcast. And this season, I'm delighted to be joined by none other than my co-host, Vicki Davitashvili. Vicki?
Are you ready to embrace the joy of leadership, the power of self-discovery, and the limitless potential of your career, and ultimately your entire life? Join us on this incredible journey of transformation.
Yep, stay tuned because the best is yet to come. So welcome back, listeners. Afsheen here, joined by Vicki Davitashvili for our Getting Real podcast episode. And today we are talking on the topic of how to get promoted. And I know this is really important. We are touching on a topic that matters to a lot of people. And certainly it's something that is very important to Vicki as well. And so this was on her priority list, I would say. And so I'm really happy to be able to contribute to this conversation today, Vicki. Thanks for bringing this to the forefront. And welcome back. Good morning, where you are. It is officially Tuesday. And so we are almost into the week. We're almost halfway into the week. And it's February. How did that even happen, Vicki? Can you believe that we are so far into 2024 already? And with that, I'm going to hand over to you and ask you what you think about it being February the 6th and what you think about how to get promoted.
Time is definitely flying at warp speed, I feel like. So it's quite amazing. But I did want to talk about how to get promoted. And the reason that this topic is so near and dear to my heart is because it's something that I will very vulnerably admit to I struggled with in my career. And, now that I'm kind of exactly where I want to be in my career, it's something that I see a lot of other people struggle with. And so I want to share some of my experiences coupled with your wisdom, right, as a professional, and, really create the space and provide the practical applications behind how to think about promotions, but then what do you do to get promoted, right? Because there's also action that needs to be taken in order to do that. I'll tell you my story super quickly. And then I can tell you about why this is inspiring me these days. My story is that I was always a top performer. And in my mind, I always felt that if you come in, you work hard, and you do an amazing job, that means you're getting promoted. And that's how I always perceived, how people grow up in the organization. And the longer that I worked in corporate, the more I started to learn that there's so much more than being a top performer. And I find a lot of even people on my team or people that I come in contact with, they are of the same mindset. But I'm a top performer. Why am I not getting promoted? Right? And they equate it with the same thing. And there's so much more that goes into that. And that's why I want to demystify this notion of how to get promoted and what do you need to do to get promoted, because it's, being a top performer is just a small piece of the broader puzzle in your career as you navigate it. So that's the inspiration behind this conversation, and to really open up the curtain for people and to demystify what it truly takes to grow in your career. So I'll pause here. I'd love to hear your thoughts. I can then delve into some of the statistics and just practical wisdom from my 20 plus career and what I've learned thus far. But I want to hear your thoughts.
Yay! So thanks for asking. And I think what I like people to think about when they are wondering why it is that they're not getting promoted or what it is they can do in order to get promoted is, I find it really fascinating. People actually hesitate to ask their line manager what it's going to take. So, and I think that's a really important step to not forget. And sounds simple enough. What's it going to take? I've been, and funny enough, not enough people have that conversation. So, for example, I performed really, really well this year, and also performed really well last year. And so I expect a promotion. And then I discovered that I didn't get the promotion. And then I may automatically go to resentment. And I think there's a space between those two states of mind. Perform, resentment. Perform, resentment. So what's that space in the middle, and how can you make the most of that space? And as a coach, I want to really invite you to think about those spaces in the middle, and what you can do in order to utilize those spaces in the middle. One of the things I suggest is find out through a very direct, intentional, open conversation, and that means be ready to hear all your strengths and also your development areas about what it's going to take for you to get promoted. And sometimes when you're lucky and you have a great manager who is ready to have a courageous conversation with you on what it's going to take you to get promoted, you will get the truth and the unvarnished truth. And after you've dealt with the unvarnished truth, you can apply yourself to that unvarnished truth, and you won't be surprised then to get promoted. And I think that's a really important key step in this process, because it takes a lot more than just performance, as you said, to get promoted. And so always ask yourself, what is it going to take for me to be in the next level up, not just good at this job right here? So what comes up for you, Vicki, as I share that?
So I think that it's important to both speak to your manager, but also other people in the organization and other people that are in the role that you'd like to be in, because they will be able to share the journey, the lessons learned for what they had to do or how they were able to navigate their careers. And I think that this is an amazing way for you to learn from other people. Now, before we even delve into this, I want to share something with you. So according to ADP, which is a company that does the employee paychecks in the United States, they're pretty well known. So what they say is that only about 4.5% of the people that are hired get promoted within 2 years of starting a job. And on average, only about 6% of employees get promoted annually. So when you think about that, right, I know that a lot of times you talked about that gap when you feel resentful and you're like, hey, well, why is so-and-so getting promoted and why am I not getting promoted, right? That's that gap, and that's that 94% of the employees that are not getting promoted. So I think it's really important to keep a lens of, yeah, so many people are getting promoted, but the majority is not, right? Because I think that a lot of times we do tend to get into that whole comparison game, which is like, comparison is the thief of joy. Always focus on who you are, where you are, what value you're bringing to the organization, and just like do you. And as long as you're focused on you, you will get to where you want to be, right? So I wanted to kind of point that out. The other thing I'd ask you is, why do you want to get promoted? What's your why? And it's interesting because I will talk to people who are top performers, and interestingly enough, top performers will usually, because they're performing well year over year, their salaries will be like the one that is at the next level, if you had been at the next level, right? Because you're getting bonuses, you're getting all those comp, etc. So from a pay scale perspective, a lot of times those people, and I know this was happening with me, I was on par. My responsibilities were on par of that of the next level. But you know what was irking me is that I didn't have the title and the recognition that, you know, I am performing at that next level. So I would ask yourself, like, what's your why? Like, why is getting promoted so important to you, right? What would you have at the next level that you don't have right now? And if it's the title and recognition, listen, I'm the first one to tell you I was in that boat. I totally get it. I totally get it. But I also want you to keep line of sight that if comp is important to you, if the work that you're doing is important to you, if you are a top performer, you're most likely 75% of the way there. Versus like if you had been in a different, at the next level. So I'll pause here. I want to get your thoughts, and then I have a bunch of other questions that I want to pose to you listening, and give you some practical advice around this as well.
You know what I thought was really important in that, and I love your pragmatic approach to it. I think what was really important was where you said, I wanted to be recognized for the work that I was doing. And sometimes the title is the recognition of the work that you're doing. And I've seen a lot, especially women, a lot of women tell themselves that, oh, it's okay, right? And I made that mistake once, where I told myself, it's okay, I'm doing the job that everybody else is doing, but I don't have the title that everybody else has. And I think it's really important at that point to have an honest conversation with yourself about, as you said, what it is that really does inspire, motivate you. And if it is that you can say, okay, it inspires me to make the right salary but not have the right title, that's fine. And if it isn't, then it's really important to have that conversation with your employer, because what you're doing is giving voice to something that might be unsaid and is not equitable. And equity is incredibly important when it comes to the organization workplace today. There were things that 10 years ago would have been okay, but they're not okay anymore. And you actually have more of a footing to stand on now on these topics. So I would even suggest, in hindsight, that, and given how much more of an appetite there is for topics like equity, to again speak up and say, I am not feeling equally compensated or equally titled or equally whatever that is versus my colleagues, and then learn to advocate for yourself and advocate well. And then find allies in the organization and have them advocate for you. So before, and I think what I keep going, I'm going to go back full circle to where I started. There is a space in the middle between being where you are and getting resentful. And it's wider now than it was ever before. That space where you can speak up more, that space where you can have allies, where you can advocate more, and use it. Because it is the gift that those of us who were pioneers in the space 10 years ago did not have. So my point of view is step into it, because we'd be delighted if you did. We walked that path for you, and you can walk that path for yourself now. Over to you, Vicki.
Yeah. So important, advocating for yourself and really learning to advocate for yourself, and knowing that, you know, advocating for yourself doesn't make you aggressive, and it doesn't make you bad in any way, right? In fact, people will respect you so much more when you advocate for yourself in the room. And know that when you advocate for yourself, You're in an energy of self-empowerment. And when you're in an energy of self-empowerment, everybody else will respect you too. So please don't ever think that advocating makes you mean or all of these stereotypical words
That's
that go with
demanding. That's a word that comes up. Never satisfied. That's a word that comes up, and that's okay.
Yeah.
Be very clear about where you are coming from.
Yeah.
And advocate.
Yeah. 1,000%. And speaking of advocacy, this was on my list. It's important for you to surround yourself with advocates, but there are two different kinds. There is the mentor, and then there is the sponsor, right? The mentor, and I think it's really important for you to know how to leverage your relationships. A mentor, and I didn't know any of this, right? I love the fact that you said, Afsheen, that we paved the way for you, because we did, right? We had to walk and take our time and spend years, well, I did, in corporate, learning all of these tricks, right? I had no clue, right? My starting point was, I'm doing a good job. Hey, are you going to promote me, right? But that's the thing. Here's the thing. You need to surround yourself with a group of people that will advocate for you, but you can build that network very strategically and very differently. So you should get yourself a couple of mentors, a few. And it's good for you to have a multi-level, multidisciplinary group of mentors. I love having mentors. Some might be experts in the industry. Some might be experts in, I work in digital marketing. Some might be just really high up in the organization, and you just build a relationship with them, right? And then they can open up the doors for you, maybe building a relationship with somebody in human resources, right? And the head of human resources, and they can say hey, have you been talking to so-and-so, right? So these are people that can just open doors for you, give you perspective, maybe shine a light on, give you feedback on your career, on the work that you're doing, right? That's mentorship. It's also really important for you to get sponsorship. Now, sponsors are people who actually have leverage in the room. And when it's time for them to go, for senior leaders to go into the room to talk about calibration, who's up for a promotion, why should these people be promoted, they have a seat at the table, and they can advocate for you. And they can help progress your cause to get promoted. Because trust me, you cannot get promoted just because the manager is saying that you're so amazing. In order for somebody to get promoted, there have to be almost a unanimous agreement around the table. And around the table is all the direct reports, or it's a group of people. And you need to have visibility with that group of people, number one. And number two, you need to have somebody at the table who will, for example, come and say, hey, isn't Vicki amazing? I think she's ready for a promotion. How does everybody else feel, right? And they will know how to navigate the conversation in a way so that it is of a benefit to you. So that's sponsorship. And it is incredibly important for you to have that level of sponsorship at the senior level who can influence the decision making when it's the right time. I can't speak enough about this because I think so many of us miss that point and miss the boat on that. So let me pause right there. I want to turn it over to you, Afsheen, get your thoughts, and then I want to give you a couple of other tools in terms of how you need to navigate your career.
Awesome. And I hope I don't steal your thunder here. What's coming up for me is succession planning. So a lot of people don't know. So it kind of passes you by, and it's a process that happens and often happens in these hushed, hallowed conversations that very few people are invited to. And these are called succession planning conversations. And they run in tandem with your performance management conversations and your goal setting conversations and your development planning conversations. So those will be three pieces that you will be experienced in, you'll have experience. But what you won't experience and where you won't have a seat at the table or a voice to advocate for yourself, and I think that's where Vicki's going, is in that table, in that room, in that hallowed environment, which is where succession planning happens. And so different organizations do different succession planning in different ways. So find out how succession planning is done in your organization. Go to your HR person and say, how does succession planning take place anyway? Just so that you're well informed. Just so that you know that after performance management and after development planning, what happens next to, again, advocate, to fully be able to advocate for yourself, you need to know fully where conversations about yourself happen. And to fully be able to leverage your sponsors and your allies and all of that, you need to know where in this process they belong. And succession planning is a big place, is a big moment in many organizations where leaders sit around a table and decide on who is going to fill the critical roles in the organization. And often the critical roles in the organization are the best roles, the most interesting roles. And also the not so critical roles, which also might be super interesting for some. So that, I think, is really important. Find out what happens in the succession planning conversations, when they happen, what are the criteria for the succession planning conversations. And you might surprise your HR person. They're going to be wondering why you know so much or why you're asking about the success. Nobody has ever shown me a lot of interest in this process. And I know that it is one of the most critical processes in a person's career. And they're happening in these hallowed environments, where very few people get a seat at the table. So go ahead and show your interest in the succession planning conversation at your organization. Talk to HR, talk to your manager, and say, how does one get discussed there? Like, how do I get myself discussed there? Don't hesitate to be really curious. You can absolutely advocate for yourself. And I don't think anybody's they're going to be surprised, but they're not going to say, I'm not going to tell you. They'll tell you how those conversations are carried out so that you can feel a little bit more empowered in terms of what happens outside of your span of control even. Over to you, Vicki.
I love that. See, this is why it's so good for I'm going to call this like a 360 conversation between you and me, right? Because you bring such a different lens into how these processes work. I've been like just falling into it just from making mistakes and from learning, but absolutely succession planning is also a key decision point in the year, because you got to understand, right? There are certain key, in product management, we have these like key moments of truth, right? Like the key moments at which things happen in the customer's life cycle where you really have an opportunity to affect them, to change their mind, to delight them, to disgust them, right? Like, so you want to make sure that you're hitting on that. In your career or during the annual cycle, you have a few critical points, right? It's the self-assessment, right? The self-assessment time. It is the time when you're doing a review and really opening up and having candid conversations around like your career and where do you need to go, and what Afsheen said at the very beginning, which is like, hey, just like opening up the conversation. I feel that I'm ready for the next level. What do you think? Do you see any gaps? If so, awesome. Can we work together? Or what do I need to do to help fill those gaps, right? Come from a place of genuine curiosity and take in the input that you will get from that 360 view, right? From your peers, from your manager, to help get you to where you want to go. It only makes you better. Then you've got the calibration cycle. So this is what happens from the manager's lens, right? We have a calibration cycle I calibrate my team, then I calibrate my team with my boss. My boss then calibrates the team at the entire, business unit level, right? And then you've got the, later on in the year, you've got the promotion cycle calibration, right? And you've got the grids, and you figure out, like, depending, like, people use 4-box, 9-box, like, there are different methodologies to this, right? And that's where we all come together as leaders, and we say, like, hey, what do you think of so-and-so? The manager advocates, but the manager advocates the least. Everyone else around the table advocates a lot more. And if there's no one advocating for that person, guess what? They go from promotable within 2 years to promotable within 4 years very quickly, right? So those conversations are extremely important. So that is why it's important for you to have visibility into how these things are working. But I want to bring you back to something like super practical in terms of like what you can do. One of the mistakes that I also was making, again, going back to, but I'm doing an amazing job, why am I not getting promoted, was I had a conversation with a female leader, and she was just amazing. She was like this rising star. And I reached out to her, and I just really wanted to understand her magic, the magic sauce. Like, what were those ingredients that she had that were really making her such an up and coming star? And you could just see it. She was somebody who was getting promoted all the time, bigger scope, bigger teams. And I'm like, what is this magic potion? And she told me something very smart. And she said, Vicki, you got to understand that doing your job really well is just table stakes. That's just table stakes. It's not about doing a good job with what's already in your job description. It's what are you doing that is above and beyond? And it's above and beyond. It's like maybe bringing in strategic thinking, bringing in critical thinking, thinking outside of the box, being able to bring people together. It's your ability to influence. It's your ability to, take on an incremental assignment and doing something there. Sometimes you have to even volunteer your time and work on like a really shiny project to get you the visibility. Then I talked to this other guy who was also an up and coming star, another one who was always getting promoted. I was like, what is your secret sauce? And he said to me, Vicki, and I loved his honesty. He said, listen, you could be the best of the best, but unless you've got the shiny projects and you've got the scope, it's really hard to justify promoting you. So when you're in a role, look at what is your scope, what outcomes are you driving, what are you doing that is above and beyond? And above and beyond can also be like, are you chairing, a women's association, or did you start a new group? Like, how are you creating incremental value beyond just your scope of responsibility? So just recognize and realize that your day-to-day job and responsibilities is only table stakes. And always look for a role that has meaty, important outcomes and that has the importance and the visibility in the organization to give you that visibility too. So I want to pause here. I want to get your thoughts, Afsheen, and your perspectives on this.
I really, really love what you just shared. You shared two things, and one you really expanded on. So see the shiny projects, get on them. One, I felt like, oh my gosh, I wish you would speak more. So I'm going to scratch under the surface of that one. And that was that piece around, are you bringing strategic thinking? Or maybe you're bringing critical thinking, or maybe you're bringing your influencing skills. What is that special sauce that you are bringing? And that, because yes, you're doing your job well, baseline, good for you. But in order for you to bring something else, find that something else in you. Take a little time to know what your brand of uniqueness is. And really, really, really lean into that with joy and self-confidence. So if it is that Your brand of uniqueness is that you always speak to the truth. Or I can think of every leader that I have seen successfully grow in an organization had that something. But it was unique to each and every one of them. It was that something that was a skill or a way of being that only they had. It was so rare. It was so unique. And you know what? All of us have one of that, or two of those. And that's that something. How can you figure out what your something is? And then how can you live in it? I remember I worked with someone who was so special, such a special leader. And she continues to just thrive in her career. And I look at her and I marvel at her special something. And her special something is, no matter how complex anything gets, she has this ability to see straight through it and to the outcome. And so while everybody's constantly trying to juggle with all the various stakeholders and influencers, and she can see right through a very hairy issue and get to the other side of it with such clarity and such focus and such efficiency. It's hard to find people like that. I can see that. I can see why she's so desired in so many, not just within her organization, but organizations outside her organization. The question for me is, what is your special something? And then how can you lean into that? And that's going to be a real differentiator. That's the word. That differentiator is going to be something that people will want on their teams. Then people who need that differentiating skill, intuitive sauce, whatever it is, they will want that on their teams. So how can you amplify that in yourself? I'm going to stop here, Vicki. You really inspired me there.
I love that. So I love, it's interesting. I went out to dinner with somebody the other day, and we were talking about someone that we know extremely well, and we've known this person for like 20 years. And this individual is just a rising star. And, we kind of made a comment of like, oh my God, have you been watching his LinkedIn posts? And I said, yeah, have you? And so, this friend of mine goes, it's amazing. And I said, yeah, but you recognize that he's now building a personal brand. Like, he has a very unique personal brand. This is why he continues to stand out at the company, but also now even in his social media presence and the things that he's saying. I said, so, it's no longer that he is just a VP of XYZ. He's now his own unique entity. So I find it really, really interesting that
his life now. You know what I mean?
That's exactly right? And so he's getting all of these speaking engagements and all this stuff, right? Which all totally makes sense because people know exactly what he stands for. I'm going to throw this back to you though, Afsheen. Like, do you have any frameworks or ideas or thoughts on like, what kind of introspective questions can, the average Joe or Jane ask him or herself to try to find that uniqueness, right? Because I think that this is where we all struggle, is to help answer like, what's my unique me? What makes me unique?
Mm-hmm. And I think the first thing that pops into my mind is ask. Ask. Just ask. It's really as simple as that. What is that word that keeps coming up when people are speaking about you or speaking with you? What is that word? Start paying attention. Pay attention and ask. Getting a really simple feedback form out there from people to help understand yourself better If you have 360s in your organization, that's great. I find they're very complex and they're very loaded. But a very, very simple, what are my gifts? Or which values do you see? If one of the things you could do is actually reference your organization values and ask, which value do you see me living consistently? Give me some examples. There are nuggets. There is, the breadcrumbs, the trail of breadcrumbs. If you pay attention, you will find them. So it's really just about pay attention to the breadcrumbs and ask.
I love that. And I actually jotted this down because I think this is something that even I need to go on this like introspective journey too on. So, and the one thing I would tell you is that your unique gifts 2 years ago are not the same as your unique gifts that you have today, because you have grown, you have evolved, you have changed. And so I think that perhaps this is a meeting that you need to have with yourself at least maybe once a year around the start of the year, right? And maybe that's a time for you to introspect, or at the end of the year, and to ask yourself, like, what are my unique gifts now? What makes me unique now? Because even if you've done this exercise a couple of years ago, this is one of those that you should do regularly. So I love that. The last thing I want to also share and impart on you who is listening at the moment is act as if. Literally, act as if. So when I was a director, but I, in my heart of hearts, believed I was a VP because of my scope, because of the work that I was doing, the outcomes that I was driving, the team that I was leading, even the way that I was being compensated. I was being compensated as a VP. But I didn't have the title, and I didn't have the recognition, the formal recognition. And thus, that's where my frustration lied, right? Just like what you were saying. And I knew I was worth being a VP. I was just acting as if I was just acting as a VP. I was like, in my mind, I was a VP, right? And I wasn't waiting for someone else to validate it and to tell me that I was. And so, a lot of times people will say to you, oh, well, if you want to get the job at the next level, you already need to be performing that job. You need to be performing at the next level before you can even get promoted to get to the next level. At least that had been my experience for a really long time. And interestingly enough, I did not get the promotion at my old job. I did get a phenomenal promotion at my new job. But the reason is that by the time that this new company was interviewing me, I was already in the mindset of a VP. Like, I didn't need to validate. I mean, they knew I was a director level. Like, I wasn't, dishonest about it. But they knew that in my entire beingness, the way that I thought about people management and leadership and outcomes that I was driving, the language that I was using, they already could sense that I was ready, that I was at the next level anyways, right? And so it made them very comfortable putting me at the helm at my new job. And so I think that a lot of times, don't allow the title to hold you back from acting as if, because if you are performing at that next level, whether it is at your current job or at the next job, you will get to that level. But you have to, in your own mind, recognize that you're already at that level and perform at that level, right? So act as if. And the last thing that I will say with that is, listen, if you're not getting the recognition that you feel you deserve and that you're worth, it's okay to leave your current job and to get the recognition at another job. It's okay. As much loyalty and love as I had for my previous employer, my previous boss, my team, everything, I really felt like I deserved to be at the next level. And when the perfect opportunity came around, I left. And I'm extremely happy with where I am now. And I feel equitably recognized, right? And it's so important for you to feel that you are being equitably recognized for the work, the contribution, the value that you're bringing to the organization. You have to be fully happy. You don't want to be in this gap of frustration. So I would tell you, if you're trying, if you're doing all the things, if you're raising your hand, if people know you want to get promoted, you've got the scope, but it's just not happening for you for whatever reason, it can absolutely happen for you somewhere else. And it's okay. Give yourself that permission. So I pause here and I turn it over to you, Afsheen, for closing thoughts.
Yeah, my closing thoughts is I completely agree with you. Sometimes organizations don't even have the space. And so this is what's really important is to remember it's not about you. It's not about you. It's about so many things, and all you can control is what is within your span of control. So if you're not getting the promotion you want, you're stepping into all the things we've talked about, except this is not about you. This is about equity at your organization. This is about them not having the roles. This is about them planning to restructure in 6 months and not being able to communicate with you. This could be about so many other things, right? It's not about you. You go chase your happiness. And I love what you say, Vicki. Step into the role that you think you deserve, that you know you can do. Just do it. Get the practice in until that role shows up somewhere else. Whether it's in your organization or whether it's outside. Fill the empty space in the middle, the one that's I'm resentful, with the stuff that empowers you. And that makes your journey, not one that was driven. You're at the helm. It's not being driven by somebody else.
Love that. Wisdom from the top. Wisdom from above. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Afsheen, for your tremendous insights. I think that this is going to help so many of us that have struggled with getting promoted and are struggling, right? And are not really understanding the mystery behind what it takes to get promoted. So thank you for demystifying so much of this and helping us find the shortcut towards where we want to be in our careers that much faster. So appreciate this conversation.
Oh, and I appreciate you for wanting to help the universe get those shortcuts, those lessening the paths and the pain of those paths, because I think that is such noble work. So thanks, Vicki, for your intention. Yeah, I'm so happy to be a part of these conversations. Stay tuned, because the best is yet to come.